Sometimes danger doesn't come with a snarl. It comes with a gentle tone, a soft voice, a perfectly timed laugh. There's no storm outside, only a storm within, hidden beneath layers of charm, intellect, and control. You don't see it at first, you feel it. A faint misalignment, like the soul behind the eyes has stepped just an inch to the side. Carl Jung spent his life listening to the quiet disturbances in people's lives. What disturbed him most weren't violent tempers or visible breakdowns. It was the illusion of normalcy, the ones who seemed fine, too certain, too polished. He understood something we often forget, that the deepest wounds don't scream. They smile, they lead, they inspire, but inside, they've lost contact with something essential. And when a person can no longer see their own darkness, they begin to cast it onto everyone else. This isn't about judgment, it's about awareness, because recognizing these signs in others also teaches us how to recognize them in ourselves. And that's where the real work begins, not in condemning the shadow, but in meeting it with open eyes. So let's begin, not with fear, but with quiet clarity. Not to run from the darkness, but to understand what it's been trying to show us all along. Shadow projection, the war. We don't know, we're fighting. Have you ever been blamed for something that didn't belong to you? Someone looks at you and sees something dark. They call you cold, selfish, manipulative, but you know, deep down, that's not who you are. Still, they believe it with conviction, and no amount of explanation seems to reach them. That's not confusing. That's projection. Carl Jung called it shadow projection. When a person casts the rejected parts of themselves onto someone else and fights them there. It's not just about anger, it's about blindness. The psyche refuses to face what it can't accept, so it exiles it. Not into silence, but into the faces of the people closest to us. You become the villain in someone else's unconscious story, the mirror they smash to avoid seeing themselves. They don't know they're doing it. In fact, that's what makes it dangerous, because they're not deceiving you. They're deceived by their own unresolved pain. And when they speak with the kind of certainty that can only come from something deeper than logic. You try to explain, they double down. You try to retreat, they push harder. And all the while you're wondering, why does this feel so personal when it clearly isn't about me? Because it isn't. Not truly. You're not the threat. You're the screen onto which their shadow has been thrown. And in their mind, the story makes perfect sense. Because they are fighting you, but seeing them. This is where the silent damage begins, not with violence, but with misrecognition, with the refusal to see one's own darkness, and the need to destroy it in someone else. You can't fix this for them. You can only recognize it, and choose whether or not to stay in the story, because when someone won't face their shadow, they will make you carry it. And you have a choice to keep playing a role in their unconscious war, or to step out of the projection and finally come home to yourself. Psychic inflation, the most seductive madness. There's a certain kind of person who doesn't just believe they're right. They know it, utterly, absolutely, without a flicker of doubt. They speak with calm authority, with a kind of stillness that feels like truth. But if you listen closely, that stillness is not peace, it's control. Jung called this psychic inflation a dangerous fusion between the ego and something far larger, an archetype, the savior, the prophet, the voice of truth. And when the ego identifies with this power, it loses its humility and calls it enlightenment. This isn't ordinary arrogance. It doesn't shout. It radiates. It seduces. Because in a world full of doubt, certainty feels like salvation. But behind the glow is fragility. A psyche stretched beyond its limits, trying to contain something it was never meant to hold. And when it breaks, it doesn't just collapse. It explodes. Disagreement becomes heresy. Critique becomes betrayal. There's no conversation, only correction. The tragedy? They don't think they're being grandiose. They believe they're serving a higher truth. They believe they are the channel, the light, the way. But true spiritual maturity doesn't need to be seen. It doubts itself. It listens. It remains human. Psychic inflation pretends to transcend the ego while quietly being consumed by it. Jung saw how this state could inspire revolutions or destroy them. How leaders inflated with archetypal energy could gather thousands with their conviction and leave devastation in their wake. Because when someone believes they are beyond error, they stop growing, they stop hearing, and slowly, they stop being. So if you find yourself drawn to someone's absolute certainty, pause. Feel beneath their words. Look for humanity. And if it's not there, you're not in the presence of wisdom. You're standing in the shadow of a god the ego was never meant to become. The perfect persona, flawless on the outside, hollow within. Sometimes the most unsettling people are the ones who never slip. They always say the right thing, know how to smile just enough. Their voices never crack, their hands never shake. They seem ideal. But ideal is not the same as real. Carl Jung called this mask the persona, the part of ourselves we create to meet the world, to be liked, accepted, admired. We all wear one, but some forget it's a mask. And when that happens, when there's no longer a space between who they are and who they perform to be, something essential is lost. Authenticity, soul, contact with the living self. It's not the imperfection we fear. It's the absence of it. Because when someone appears flawless, it often means their shadow has been sealed away, locked behind the surface, festering in silence. And the more tightly they cling to that image, the more pressure builds beneath it. Until one day, the mask slips. And what emerges isn't just a moment of vulnerability, it's an eruption. Jung saw this in those who seemed too well adjusted, those who fit perfectly into every room, but felt strangely empty when you sat with them. Their words were kind, but lacked presence. Their laughter was polite, but never reached their eyes. You don't notice it at first. It's too subtle, but your nervous system knows. Something in you whispers, this isn't real. And that whisper is often the first thread of truth. Modern neuroscience tells us our mirror neurons catch it, those minute incongruences between expression and emotion. That's why you feel uneasy, even when everything seems fine. Because you're not in conversation with a person. You're interacting with a projection, a version of themselves they've spent years curating, so they never have to feel the pain that lies beneath. The tragedy? This mask may have started as protection, a way to survive childhood, rejection, failure. But over time, it became their identity. And now, they no longer know what exists behind it. Jung warned, the more rigid the persona, the more dangerous the shadow. Because everything they won't allow themselves to be doesn't disappear. It builds. And when it finally breaks through, it doesn't whisper. It roars. So when you meet someone who's flawless, be curious. not judgmental, but curious. Perfection is often a performance, and beneath the spotlight, something real is quietly asking to be seen. Not by the world, but by the self that's been waiting to come home. Archetypal possession, when a symbol takes over the soul. You're speaking to someone you've known for years, but suddenly they feel distant. Their voice is familiar, but their presence isn't. There's a strange tension behind their words, like they're no longer speaking as themselves, but on behalf of something larger, something ancient, something impersonal. Jung called this archetypal possession. It happens when a person fuses with a powerful inner image, the hero, the judge, the martyr, the prophet. And once that fusion occurs, the individual disappears. They no longer feel like a person. They feel like a role is being played by something that doesn't know how to stop. They speak in absolutes. They radiate certainty. They no longer ask questions because in their mind, they are the answer. And that's where the danger begins. This isn't just ego. It's not simple arrogance or pride. It's the loss of inner balance, the collapse of self-awareness beneath the weight of mythic identity. They're no longer them. They are the cause, the mission, the cosmic narrative. And anyone who disagrees becomes the villain, the enemy of truth, the obstacle in their holy path. Archetypes are powerful. They're not good or bad, they just are. But when we mistake them for our personal truth, we stop being human and become something else. History is full of these moments. Leaders who believed they were chosen, movements that began with hope and ended in destruction. Because archetypes don't compromise, they don't listen, they don't reflect, they move forward, no matter what, no matter who gets crushed underfoot. Jung warned, the more someone identifies with divine purpose, the less they can hold human vulnerability. And here's the subtle tragedy. They often believe they're helping. They see themselves as healers, guides, saviors. But if you look closely, there's no room for nuance, no room for doubt, no space left for conversation, only declaration. You'll feel it, in their presence, in their gaze. It's like the light in their eyes has shifted, no longer warm, no longer curious, just focused, intense, certain. And when you sense that, pause, because you're not just dealing with a person anymore. You're speaking to a force, and forces don't listen. They carry out their design. So, what do? You don't fight it. You don't try to wake them up with logic, because in that state, logic is meaningless. All you can do is holding your center. Stay rooted in your own presence, your own humanity, because one day, when the archetype lets go, when the spell breaks, they'll need someone who still sees the person behind the role, someone who didn't get swept away, but stood still, clear, quiet, and awake. Repetition compulsion, the trap that looks like fate. Different names, different faces, but somehow the same pain, the same heartbreak, the same betrayal, the same quiet collapse you've been through before, just dressed in different clothes. This is not a coincidence. This is repetition compulsion, a deep, unconscious pull to recreate the wounds we never got to heal. Jung understood this as the psyche's strange longing for wholeness, even if it means walking back into suffering, even if it means bleeding in the same place again, just to see if this time the wound might finally close. We don't do this because we're broken. We do it because something inside us still hopes that if we replay the story, we might finally change the ending. But here's the painful truth. We're not writing the story. We're acting it out, blindly, because the script lives in the unconscious, written by forgotten moments, buried shame, old heartbreaks we never fully grieved. So we found someone new, and within weeks, they're playing the same role someone else once did. The controlling parent, the unavailable lover, the abandoning friend. And without realizing it, we become actors in our own recurring dream, casting people into roles they never auditioned for. Jung called this negative synchronicity, when our inner wounds attract outer circumstances that echoes our pain. So, precisely, it feels like fate. But it's not fate. It's a signal, a cry from the unconscious. See me, heal me, stop repeating to me. The moment you begin to notice the pattern, that is the invitation. Not to judge yourself, not to blame others, but to pause the story long enough to ask, what is this really about? What am I being asked to finally feel? Because what you don't transform, you will transmit. And what remains unconscious will continue to direct your life until you choose to bring it into the light. This isn't about fixing your past. It's about recognizing that your future depends on what you refuse to repeat. So the next time the pattern begins again, don't just react, reflect. You're not cursed. You're being called to break the loop, to write a new ending, and to finally step out of the story that was never truly yours to live. The path of transformation, shadow integration. There is only one way out of these unconscious cycles, and it doesn't come through being better or stronger or more spiritual. It comes through being whole. Shadow work isn't about fixing yourself. It's about facing yourself completely. The parts you admire, the parts you deny, and the parts you've buried so deeply you forgot they were ever yours. To integrate the shadow is to walk into your own darkness, not to destroy it, but to listen, to understand what it's been trying to protect all along. It means seeing the wound behind your anger, the fear beneath your control, the shame that quietly drives your perfection. Jung made it clear. This is not about morality. It's not about being good. Good can be performed. But wholeness is earned. It comes from sitting with contradiction without needing to resolve it. From admitting, I am capable of everything I judge in others. And yet, choosing not to act from that place. When we integrate the shadow, we no longer need to project it. We no longer need to fight it in others, because we've finally made peace with it in ourselves. This is where authenticity is born. Not in our strengths, but in our ability to hold our darkness with honesty and without shame. Shadow integration isn't a destination. It's a lifelong relationship with the truth of who you are. And the beauty is, once you begin this path, you start to see others differently too. You stop needing to label them good or bad. You begin to feel the hidden pain beneath their masks. You offer grace without losing your boundaries. Because when you've met your own shadow, you no longer fear someone else's. This is the quiet strength Jung pointed to, the soul that doesn't shine with perfection, but with presence. Still, solid, real. So the question is no longer, how do I become better? It's, am I willing to be fully myself? All of it. The light, the dark, the grief, the gold. Not to be perfect, but to finally be free. A flower doesn't bloom by denying the soil it came from. It blooms because the light reached what was buried, even the roots tangled in darkness. You don't awaken by rising above your shadow. You awaken by turning toward it, with clarity, with compassion, with courage. So ask yourself gently, have you seen these signs in others? Or more bravely, in yourself? Because the most dangerous patterns aren't the ones we see, they're the ones we refuse to. And yet, that refusal is not your fate. It's just the beginning. Awareness is not judgment. It's a doorway. And every time you step through it, you reclaim a part of yourself that was waiting to be known. This work is not about becoming someone else. It's about remembering who you were before the mask, before the wound, before forgetting. So don't seek to be flawless. Seek to be real, rooted, awake. Because when the light touches even your darkest places, that's when you begin to grow not away from yourself, but back into wholeness. Welcome to the real journey, not upward, but inward. A flower doesn't bloom because it's flawless. It blooms because the light reaches even its darkest roots. Growth begins the moment we turn inward, not away. If this reflection spoke to something in you, leave a comment below. Sometimes, a few honest words can spark someone else's awakening. Like, share, and subscribe if you feel called. Echoes of thought continue, and the journey is only just beginning.